Welcome to another Black Male Impact. My name is Richard A. Cross, and today's guest is Leonard Webb. Welcome to the conversation, Mr. Webb.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Cross. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Man, thank you, man. I'm glad you took the opportunity because I saw some of the work that you are doing, and I'm just going to share just a little of your bio, and then I give you the opportunity to share with the audience more before we get into the conversation. So, Mr. Webb focuses on ending the school-to-prison pipeline. He's a school-to-prison pipeline strategist, helping educators improve relationship with students, school culture, and increase academic success through proven equity-based strategies and leadership. Mr. Webb, welcome to the conversation. And before we get into the questions, I would like for you to share something else, anything, with the people that's listening.
The most I like to share is just my journey from New York City and being in an environment that really didn't focus on education and being able to get my education and getting into law enforcement and then having a paradigm shift in my life to move into the education field at the age of 48.
Wow.
It was late in life, but I felt the need to get involved because people think the school to prison pipeline is a metaphor. And it's a real thing that I found while I was working in the prison system, where young men were coming in and lacked education. And what I found was it wasn't because that they didn't like education or they weren't smart. It was because they were being pushed out through disproportionate suspensions and expulsions and movement to alternative schools. So I decided, rather than leave a job that I was pretty good at keeping men from coming back to prison, I just decided, what if I could keep young people from coming to prison?
Man, that's great. Save them from being in the system. So get them before they get to the system. So, man, that's great. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I know the people out there do appreciate the work that you're doing. And we walk similar path. I was a police officer before I got to this stage of my life, switched from the criminal justice to education myself. Not because I really saw the need, it's just I went and started teaching and fell in love with it. So that was it for me. It wasn't something that I really thought about. I always want to make an impact. So it was an easy transition once I start to love it. So before I want to just get straight into the conversation. So my first question that I want to ask you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I believe personally that mindset starts with reading, studying, listening, and training.
Okay.
We have to train our minds to be positive. And a lot of times we start off with broken or poor mindsets. And we have to help our youth to develop a more of a wealthy mindset, not in monetary means, but in the means that they have gifts that they can share with the world. When I look at a poor mindset, I look at it as passing over opportunities repeatedly.
Wow.
We do that because we haven't mastered change and we haven't managed our confidence. A lot of times, especially in school systems, our confidence gets broken and we have this broken mindset and we limit ourselves with our beliefs. So when we can master change and we can manage our confidence with the help of our elders and our educators, then we can walk out of that poor mindset or that broken mindset.
Man, and I like the acronym you use. Could you share that one more time?
Poor, passing over opportunities repeatedly.
Man, we can't afford to pass over any opportunities, especially wanting to make progress and wanting to move forward. We have to take every opportunity that we get and sometimes create those opportunities too. So I really like that thought process about how the mindset or how to make a positive impact, because mindset is really important, because what we think And as you mentioned, we have to train ourselves to think in ways that will help us to make progress. So I really appreciate that. So my next question that I want to ask is, what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Change starts in our thoughts at the very basic level. And we have to change the negative language in our heads. Science says we have 36,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are negative. So we have to train our mind to think positively. It's our survival instinct to think negatively. So there's a training that has to take place in our own minds with those negative thoughts, those self-beliefs. And we have to embrace that change in our thoughts. And we do that by experiencing things that are out of our norm, getting out of our comfort zone, and exposing ourselves to new things purposely so we can have those challenges and be able to develop a positive mindset. And then it starts with three easy steps. Know what you want, plan for what you want, and then execute to get what you want. And when you do that, you set up a system of resiliency. A lot of people think resiliency is just getting over something, but it's really, you have to have a system to in your mind and in the way you discipline yourself when adversity does hit, so that you can get over those setbacks. So you have the mindset to say, going from broke to I'm in the process of being wealthy.
Yeah, man. It goes back to your first point, as training our mind to think in the ways that we want it to be operating in. And if it is not, and as you mentioned something intentional, because we have to be intentional about that change we want within our mind, because everything starts there. The internal change first, then external, as you're saying. And as I can see on your shirt, you owe you. We owe it to ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. And we have to train our mind if we're going to be the best version of ourselves. So, man, you're representing not only in thoughts, but you're wearing it and sharing it with the world. My next question is, how can we as Black men help to change the narrative today?
When I think about narrative, I think about brands. And growing up, the brand was, for Black men, drug dealer, hustler, pimp, maybe athlete or actor, but the brand wasn't about education. And the narrative was set up as drug dealer so we can get caught up in the criminal justice system. And I relate that because there's a Black man in Texas who at 98 years old got his high school diploma. At 103, he wrote a book about his experiences. They named a middle school after him.
Wow.
His book is banned in the middle school that is named after him.
Wow.
This is what we face today. Education is under assault, and our narratives are being taken out of our schools.
Wow.
So I got into education to dismantle those painful, harmful, and toxic narratives of Black men, because I realized there weren't a whole lot of Black men in education. And the reason why, I think in part that young Black and brown people are getting suspended and expelled and removed from schools at 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 8 times, and in some states 12 times than their white counterparts, is because we don't have representation. And representation matters. And our stories shape the narratives of the next generation. So I'm trying to change the face of education from white women to Black men. And throughout this journey, I've been one of one many times. I've been at schools where I'm the only Black person in the schools. And I had to make a shift in my thinking because I thought I could change how people viewed us.
Yes.
But it can only be changed if we take on the narrative and speak our truth. That's how the change comes. I'm not worried about how other people view us. I'm going to help the young people create a narrative that's different.
Man, that is really powerful and profound. To be the one person in the space can be a challenge. But I know just looking at the work that you have done, I know you are a strong person to keep standing and doing the work. That shows your strength and commitment, but also just to realize that to change the narrative is not about what people think, but what we think about ourselves. So to get the young people to realize that they need to see themselves differently. And I really appreciate you taking it from that angle, because if we wait on people to tell us who we are, we're always going to be fitting into the mold of what is created for us. And we have to create our own narrative. So, man, I really appreciated that. And as I said, you said you've been in some spaces by yourself. I hope this journey that we're on right now, not just with the Black male impact, but get more Black men to see the need of being in those spaces to be that difference. Because if we don't write that narrative, it's still going to continue as it used to be, or as it is. So, man, I greatly appreciate the work that you're doing. And I really, really appreciate that perspective, because that's the way we have to approach it. Not what somebody else think, but what we think and what we create. So, man, I really appreciate that. And this question really ties close to your previous answers. So, but I'm still going to ask it. Well, I'm going to ask this question instead. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on now, being an educator?
There are so many people and events that I could name. I wear this shirt for Eric Thomas because he's been a big part of that. When you think of my family, my wife, my kids, there are so many people that helped me on this path, especially in the times that I was struggling. But I'm going to give a shout out to those young people that inspire me every day. And the people in my past, when I worked in the criminal justice system, the guys that were incarcerated that helped me change the narrative of how prison could work. Because in prison, you don't shake hands with a staff member, and people incarcerated don't go into offices and shut the door. And the narrative changed at the prisons that I've worked at because I brought my truth and people trusted me. And when I walked into the visiting room, guys that were incarcerated would introduce me to their families. And it's possible to do those things, getting handshakes or fist bumps on the compound, which didn't sit well with a lot of staff members. But my thought was, and I was very successful at keeping men from coming back to prison. That was a part of it, to be able to build those relationships and build those skills for the guys that were incarcerated who may have not had a father or male role model and could look at somebody and say, you know what, I may have done something wrong in my life and I may be incarcerated now, but there's a future out there for me because I can see it through him. And he believes in me and he'll shake my hand in front of staff members and take that risk and be vulnerable for me to get better. So I have to give a lot of credit for where I am today because they're the ones that really said I should be doing more with young people.
So they don't get into the system. I'm going to ask a question that I don't have here, but based on your answer, do you think making those connections, right, to the people that you work with, that you help to think differently, do you think that's innate ability, or you train yourself to build those type of relationships?
I built those type of relationships over, just like good news travels fast. When guys would hear about how I was helping them with certain things or helping them get their family approved on visiting lists or helping them with their court cases, making copies or whatever it was, they didn't see me as the police. And I changed that narrative, at least for myself, and helped them navigate through their sentences so they could be successful when they left the criminal justice system. But
Okay.
it took time to build, but it was well worth it.
Okay. But what I'm saying for you, making those connections, right? With people, is it something that you think you are born naturally with, or it's something that you train yourself?
I think that was a gift from God.
Okay.
I credit for that. But I played my role. God gave me the gifts. But like I said earlier, My mindset was developed through reading, studying, training, and listening. And most of all, listening to my higher power saying, this is this is what you need to do, and this is how you should live your life.
Okay, so yes, so innately you got the gifts, but you nurture the gift. And that is really important because we all have gifts and we have to nurture those gifts so we can use them effectively and in the spaces that we are supposed to make the impact. So hope the listeners hear that. We all have gifts, but for our gifts to work for us, we have to nurture those gifts. Spend time developing the gifts that you have or was entrusted or given by God when you got here and stuff like that. So we all have gifts. Okay. All right. My next question to you is, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
I think the climate within us as a group is promising. Like our connection, in connection with other people that I have, other Black men, I didn't see that growing up. So that climate within ourselves is so promising. I have to also say that there's a statistic out there that says in the year 2053, I think it is, that the median wealth of Black people will be zero.
Wow.
Zero. And in the next 31 years, the median wealth of Black people will be zero. And that frightens me for my children and my grandson. So I think it's a responsibility of Black men to do something about that. I have a saying that says, if you can predict it, you can prevent it. So that statistic is out there. So we can prevent it if we're actively involved. And that's if current trends continue. So we can end those trends that would make that come true. The climate I see outside of us is getting worse. We are, as always, have been endangered. We're seen as a threat. And it seems more today than it was when I was growing up. There's been a shift, I think, politically and with people that are either trying to get in office or currently in office. And with the banning of books and things like that, we have to be aggressive in voting and sitting at tables and not being afraid to flip a table over if we have to, but also building our own tables to sit at. If we don't, this country as a whole seems to be going backwards. And that scares me for a lot of Black men. I don't want to see another Black man hashtag with a name, and it seems to be happening. And that scares me. The climate outside of us seems to be getting worse, but the climate within us seems to be promising to combat that. I was appointed by the current governor of Maryland to the Juvenile Justice School Board. There's a Black man running for governor for the state of Maryland by the name of Wes Moore. And I'm so honored if he got elected and to serve under him. So I think it's important that we see the Black faces in places that haven't been.
There's so much to unpack from what you just shared. But I want to say, as you said, within us, it's promising. And that's worth thinking about, worth dwelling on. Because as you said, if they predict our wealth will be zero at a certain time, then if it's been predicted, then we can prevent it. It's just going to be, as starting from the top of what you were sharing, what we put in our mind, what we cultivate, what we think about will help to prevent the prediction. And there's a lot of change that we may have to make. But I love how you put it, where within us, it is promising. And with promise, we can combat some of these negative or falsifications that it comes when it comes to us, especially as Black men. So I want to make sure I remember those. It's within us, it's promising. And when there is a prediction of something, we can prevent it. We just have to work hard to prevent it. So I really appreciate that thought right there. So I want to ask my next question, and what change, and you may have shared this already or answer part of it, what change do you want to see in general among Black men?
When I think about that, I want to see us one, embrace therapy. And we've had traumatic histories. If you're born Black in America, you faced a lot of trauma from day one. And I think we need to embrace therapy for one. Also, I think the change we need is to embrace entrepreneurship and having our own and having multiple streams of income and building wealth for generations to come. I think we could change how we embrace our roles. I think we can step up with our roles as far as fathers, as far as community members. We need to embrace those responsibilities and understand what it means to be those things, not just say I'm a father, but what does it really mean to be that? What does it really mean to be a mentor? So we have to embrace what that means. And then lastly, embrace submission. And what I mean by that is sometimes I have to let somebody else take the wheel, whether it's a friend, a relative, but mostly just God, embracing God and knowing that He can take the wheel sometimes. And that goes kind of back to therapy. So for me, it's the four embraces: our therapy, entrepreneurship, our roles, and submission. If we embrace those four things, we can change a lot that goes on with Black men and with our communities.
Man, I really like your perspective. I really do. And more people need to hear how you share ways to help us moving forward. They were asking the questions recently, where do we go from here? And I think what you just said with embracing our roles, so being submissive or submit to, because a lot of times we think we are the ones supposed to take the lead. And yes, as men, we're supposed to lead, but every time, not in all cases, we're going to be the one holding the steering. Sometimes we have to be pushing someone up, and that's really important as we go forward. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask this question. This one is more like a personal question. So, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
I'm going to take that back to the last question when I said embrace submission. 2017, I knew God was telling me to take a different path, to leave the criminal justice system and go into the education system. And the pivotal point was a phone call from a guy's that was incarcerated's mother. And she called me and said, "Mr. Webb, I want to talk to you about what you did to my son." And I said, "Okay, tell me his name," but I'm pretty sure I didn't do anything to him. And she told me his name, and I said, "Ma'am, is he locked back up? Because he left 5 years ago." And she said, "No, he's been home for 5 years." So I was just calling to thank you.
Wow.
For because he all his life since he was 13, he's either been in juvie or in jail. He's never spent 6 months with me since he was 13. And now he spent 5 years with me.
Wow.
And it's been the time of my life. And I just wanted to thank you. And she said the same thing. She said, and I finally got the message. She said, "I wish that, and I know you get paid good money to do what you do, and I know you're good at it because you helped my son out a lot. I wish you would keep children from going to prison rather than keeping grown men from coming back to prison."
Wow.
And then she quote from Desmond Tutu, and it said, "Sometimes we have to stop pulling people out the river and figure out why they're falling in." And she left on that. She hung up the phone. And that was really pivotal to getting me from that point to where I am now. Heard that phone call. I won't be able to recognize her. I won't be able to thank her. But that was I can thank her now for that because I've never felt more important is not the right word, but it's the word I'm going to use. But she gave me a second life, and it's been beautiful since.
Man, I really love that quote as you shared it. And that's a really profound, pivotal moment to take you on the path that you're on. But the quote that you shared is important. I believe critically important now more than ever. With all the distractions that's going on, we need to figure out a way to save our young people before they get into the situations that they can't pull themselves out of. That is really important. I'm going to find a way to share that quote somewhere. It is really a powerful statement. Don't just take them out of the river. Figure out a way to stop them from getting into it. And And I think you're doing the work, and I know more people out there doing the work. So I think some of us are already committed to doing that work to prevent them from getting into the situations that's going to be hard for them to get out of. So I want to ask another question, and I think I may have a few more questions. But what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I think my life lesson has been, if you can see it, you can be it. And if you can't see it, then become it. I couldn't see, or I didn't see, Black men in education. So I became it. I became a nationally recognized speaker on ending the school to prison pipeline. I became a governor's appointee for the Juvenile Justice School Board. I didn't see that growing up. So it's important for us to be out there so our young people can see us. But if our young people don't see us, they can still become it and have another young person be able to see them. I changed my whole life at 48 years old. It's never too late. I went from being at the top of a career to starting out in the bottom, and 5 years later I feel like I'm climbing back up to the pinnacle again. But there's always another challenge. I always have another challenge, and this challenge will never be over, I don't think. I just want to build some soldiers to take it on when I'm gone.
Man, I think you're doing it because you're out there. Again, I see your content that you share. So I know you're diligent at building others up. And at some point, somebody that you built up will want to take on the role. And because, as they said, it's easier to become what they see. So them seeing you doing the work, somebody out of that group will want to do the same. You can just imagine 5 years from now, somebody said, man, I'm doing this because Mr. Webb was my guide and stuff like that. So it's important because it's going to be easier for them to become what they see. But as you said, sometimes you're not going to have the examples. You just have to be. And that's where, by you sharing these kind of messages, I think the listeners, somebody out there will hear, look, you don't have to see anybody around you doing what you think you want to do. Sometimes you have to be the first to do it. And before I ask my final question, I want to ask, where can the listeners find you and help support the work that you are doing?
Thank you for allowing me to get this out there. On social media, it's at Webvolutionary. On LinkedIn, it's Leonard Cello Webb, CHELLOWEBB. My website is intheschooltoprisonpipeline.com. The 2 is the number 2. So it's intheschooltoprisonpipeline.com. And that you can find all my information, booking, just everything I've been doing lately.
Okay. And I'm going to find a way to put it in the description so the listeners, the viewers can find you after later on. It doesn't matter when, at some point, they will be able to find you and your content and to be able to support the work that you're doing, because I believe you're doing important work. So my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I just want, as far as my family goes, is to my grandson and my children to live in a world that's better. I've always been told, leave stuff better than you found it. So I was born into a world where my parents couldn't get married. My mother couldn't have a bank account, and the world is a little better than it was back then. But I want to leave it better than I've been able to see it. I want to see more Black men in education. I hope that 2% in 10 years, with the help of people of me and people that follow me and support me, we can change that to at least 10%. That's the goal by 2030, is to have 10% of teachers be Black men. I don't know if that's too ambitious or if it's too short, but not enough. But that's the goal. And I think if we can get 10% by 2030, we can get 40% by 2035, and we can get over 50% by 2040. So with people carrying the torch, that's the world I want to see, because It's just proven that a child that has at least one black male teacher in their lives are twice as likely to go to college. So that's statistics don't lie. So I'm banking on that, and I want to see whether they go to college or become an entrepreneur. I want to see those young black people, boys and girls, change the world. That's the world I want.
Well, I'm gonna say it's not too ambitious, because I think somewhere in the conversation you said if we can believe it, we can achieve it. So we're going to believe with you that can be 30%, and listeners believe with us that it can reach 30%, because as Mr. Webb said, one student, if they have the experience of one black teacher, their chances of going to college increase. So we want to see, especially more of our students, more of our black male students going to college. They don't have to, they can still be an entrepreneur, but I think education is important. Further in their education is important, because that also helps to dismantle the falsifications and the misconceptions and the labels. So let's join in with Mr. Webb and believe that we're going to get to that 30%. And Mr. Webb, thank you. And thanks to the listeners for being here with us on the Black Male Impact. Mr. Webb, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully this is not our last conversation. As the journey continues, we should be talking again, and as we keep making an impact in our community.
Thank you. And you are making an impact. I shared your post, and I've had great responses to it. So I love the work that you're doing. The things that you post are supporting you and what you're doing. And together, we can't be beat.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, man. Thank you for being here.